It's a time for the package from China. Hey, welcome back to the channel. It's awesome that you're tuning in. Because in this video we are going to take a close look at 3 different products, but they have one thing in common. The first one is a classic one. This is the Super Console X. When the Super Console X was released, you also had the Pro model. This is the one I'm holding over here. The thing is with the Pro, there was nothing Pro about it in my opinion. It's just the same kind of product with a different kind of chipset, but has like the same results. So yeah, so it doesn't really matter if you're going to talk about the Super Console X or the Pro version, or even like a 2021 version with a different color. It's all the same stuff with a different color or a different label. The overall quality, I must give them some extra kudos for the way how they made it, because this thing looks kind of cool. There's some resemblance of a Super NES. For the communication between the controllers and the system, we have 2 USB ports, we have just an HDMI connection and an AV out. I've been seeing people who are saying getting it to work with an AV out cable and just messing around with it, like pulling it in and out. It's kind of weird, but for me it doesn't work at all. And of course it does come with an on and off switch. So when it comes to the Super Console X Pro or the normal, let's talk about the Pro. It comes with the S905X chip. Yeah, it is an AMD Cortex A53 1.5 GHz quad core, and the GPU is a Mali 450 quad core. Yeah, so basically that's what you're going to get. And an old EmuElec 3.9 that you cannot upgrade to 4 or higher. And of course the Android version. Don't even like start about that, because it's pretty damn pointless. But in general, when you're looking at the Super Console X Pro or the normal, you can play up to PlayStation 1. But particularly if you're just interested in, let's say, the old school stuff, think about some MAME games or just Atari, Commodore 64, you know, stuff like that. It runs just fine, and things like a cheap box like this is absolutely great. It has some limitation with Atomic Wave and 64, PlayStation Portable, but also Dreamcast. So up to PlayStation 1, it will be no problem whatsoever. Construction wise, the build quality was pretty damn decent, but when you're looking at the cooling, this was like an issue with a lot of these devices. So what do I mean? Like what you can see at the bottom, we have like ventilation holes for getting some heat out of the system, but basically it's at the bottom. So the construction they made is absolutely garbage. Cooling wise, they only added one tiny piece of metal for cooling the chip. Yeah, it's a little bit of a bummer. That is the thing they're doing a lot. They did improve it in the later systems. Uncommon practice that we're going to get ourselves the fake PlayStation 2 controllers or PlayStation 1 wireless, whatever. These look like a place control, but the quality overall is okay. This one comes with rubberized joysticks, but the smell of the controller, oh boy, it's really chemical. You can just basically like smell it. Yeah, absolutely horrible, I can tell you that. And the last one is going to be the arcade. It's still in the box, but yeah, believe me, it's the arcade version, or the Gamebox Arcade. But the reason I want to make a video about it is very simple. So they have one thing in common, they're like Android boxes, but they are sharing the same kinds of chips. So recently I got a comment saying, somebody asked me like, hey, I got this arcade box, is it any good? And I completely understand why he asked this, because there are so many of these things out there. It's a jungle of these freaking handhelds. Personally, I really love the design of it and this logo. I don't know if it's unique or they ripped it they ripped it off somewhere. But in the end, what you're going to get is a quite interesting product that can play a lot of retro games. But this is just a great example how they're just going to basically like marketing the same product in a different kind of case. Actually, like it's the same thing like Super Console X, only not we're going to get a box. We're just going to get ourselves 2, let's say, cheaper controllers, HDMI, all the same stuff that we're going to get with the Super Console X. Yeah, but we do have like a very cool carrying case. I really appreciate that. Of course, they did implement, let's say, a nice manual about EmuElec. That's, by the way, software you can just download for free and make these boxes way cheaper yourself, by the way. The thing is, you can just actually, like, yeah, just make it yourself cheaper and better, maybe. But for now, let's take a close look at the controllers. It comes with a very basic power supply, like the cheap to the cheap. You can see, like, they're, like, budgeting out over here. This thing comes even, like, with wired controllers, and they are, like, this is, like, the maximum chemical versions. And what do we mean with the chemical version? They smell really horrible, even from a distance, and they don't even have like a rubberized joystick. So the arcade box is basically like a way cheaper thing to basically not only get, but also to have. Like the controls are absolutely like cheap up to the point. I'm thinking they smell chemical, they feel like garbage, and this is absolutely not the way you want to play. If you don't know how to connect a controller, I'm just going to use myself an Xbox 360 for once, because this is absolutely way better. This is what we're going to get, just the basic menu like with the Super Console X. So EmuElec, need to take consideration, this is just a software you can basically like download yourself, add yourself the emulators and the files that you need. So you can basically build it yourself, maybe cheaper. But this is just a plug and play solution, so what you can play with this thing is like pretty damn impressive. So you can play the old school stuff like Sinclair, Atari, Commodore 64, Amstrad, CPC, but there is also so much stuff you can play, Neo Geo, Arcade, but what we're going to test out is the systems like Atomic Wave, Sega Dreamcast, PlayStation Portable. This thing has so much to offer, but take consideration that some of these boxes are having like really old and low specs, so we will occur some issues when it comes to emulation performance, and of course, are some of the games even playable. And just a common practice that are using the S905 chipset that comes with a quad-core AMD Cortex 853, and of course with the GPU we're going to get ourselves the 450. It's all the same stuff, and of course also with the same results. But let's take a close look inside of the machine itself, and what you can see is we have like a completely different, let's say, color of a PCB. Some are blue, some are black, but what you're going to see is like the same configuration when it comes to the USB port, the on and off switch, RD45 connector. The only thing I firstly noticed is that we have like two RAM modules that we didn't have with the previous model, but the amount is exactly the same. Also here the board says S905. I'm just coming on sometimes I'm thinking like, is this like something they just packed up in a new case, or is this just, yeah, they did implement like a tiny cooling element, but it's even like smaller than a previous one. But at the back we're going to find ourselves the sticker that also indicates that this thing is absolutely a used product. That's not a bad thing. It's good for like e-waste, but that's basically what we're going to get inside the case. Then we're having the Pauki box. The Pauki box was a completely different, like say, brand design. It came in all kinds of variations, but maybe you already seen what I'm meaning. Like we do have like a lot of things in common. So when you're looking at the cases over here, there are some, yeah, similarities, because that is what he did. They're just like ripped off the Super Console X. What they don't have in common is the controllers. That's kind of funny. Like with the Super Console X we have like pretty okay PS3 controllers, but then with the other one, like the arcade, had like the cheap ones, and I can tell you, I really hate these controllers. The form factor is not bad at all, but just the way how they actually feel and how they play. To work with the dongles, you're just going to plug it in, put in two AAA batteries, and you're ready to go. But the controllers are absolutely rubbish. What I do find quite interesting when you're opening it up, you will see the same kind of result when it comes to the PCB. Just the layout is exactly the same. Even like, I think the capacitors are exactly the same place. So the layout is the same like all the other ones. Only we do have like a blue PCB in the inside. But this model comes with the S905M chipset. It's the same quad core, but also the GPU Mali 450, 1GB of RAM. It still have like the limitation of EmuElec 3.9. So that's the thing I just wanted to show in this video. They are all freaking the same when it comes to the specs. But also when you're looking at the software, it's the same kind of version. They even use the same freaking layout, and it also means you're going to have like the same results up to PlayStation 1, having okay performance, but above that we do have like a mixed bag when it comes to that. But what can we actually play? Let's do some games, let's do some quick testing of all of the boxes, and this was basically the end result, what you can actually play on these things very well. What you will see is that the games, like the really old stuff, a lot of Chinese handhelds back in the day had a problem with the new Super Console X Pro, we have no problem, and most of these games run just fine. Alright, so first let's try N64, because this is a system that had a lot of issues with these low power devices, like with the Super consoles that we have tried here on the channel. But if you just want to play it on native resolution, no fancy upscaling, this will run just fine. But take consideration, a lot of games that are more demanding will not run very well or at all. Okay, so because of the low power chip, and it's not a good combination with the SSPP emulator. Games like Metal Slug, a two-dimensional game, will run just fine with some glitching, if you can live with it. But when you're going to get into the 3D, then we're going to get some issues. It's a little bit of a bummer in my opinion. But yeah, this is what you're going to get with most of these cheap boxes. Like I'm always saying, for the money, you can't complain. Okay, so next up, let's try some PlayStation 1. And I can say like most of these cheap boxes will run it pretty damn good. But it's most of the time on just a native resolution. I think it's not a big of a deal, but if you want to have more upscaled, let's say, resolutions, you just need to have a powerful box, and you cannot do that with a cheap device like this. But if you can live with this, it's just okay. Okay, so next up let's try some Atomic Wave. This is a system that has a lot of problems with some of the boxes. You can see like it will run just okay. Take consideration, three-dimensional games, same story like with PSP. It will have more problems. But for now you can see that it runs very well. And when we're going to progress in the stage, you will see some hiccups here and there, because it's really demanding. But the performance is an overall not bad when it comes to this game and this cheap box. I find it quite fascinating to see what they can crank out of this cheap box. Okay, so when it comes to Sega Dreamcast, this is not running on the Redream emulator, and the reason I'm saying Redream, because Redream is personally like one of my favorite emulators, because the compatibility with a lot of games is just superb. But it is not possible with this 3.9 EmuElec. Still, the performance and overall is not bad at all. You can see this game runs very well, and a lot of other games will too. But of course, we always have like hiccups, glitches, stuff like that. When you like deep. So basically when you're looking at the 3 boxes, they all have one thing in common also, is that not only they're Android, but they also have like the S905 chip inside. And with this chip, it's not like super bad, but this is like the cheap to the cheap chip. Because when you're looking at specification, what you can play with it, it is all exactly the same. Some have like a different SD card, or have like a different kind of mainboard layout, or just another color. But when you're looking at the specifications and all these things that you can play with it, it's more of the same. And that is a little bit of a bummer. But that is something that we have seen in the last couple of months, or better said, like the last couple of years. They're releasing all kinds of weird names, and they're like keep doing the same thing all over again, confusing us all, think there is something new, but in the end, what you're going to get is the same stuff all over again. But let's do a quick overview of some of these boxes, what can you basically do with it, and is it even worth picking up now? But the conclusion is very simple. When you're looking at the Palki box, this like arcade box thing, because basically the marketing is they want to show it like this is an arcade box, and actually you can play a lot of arcade games also with the Super Console X. In my opinion, you can just do the same thing with all 3 boxes. It's just in different like way it looks, and just of course in different way how they like present it. But you can also like play the same kind of games, and they will all have the same limitation when it comes to the gameplay. Let me know in the comments which one do you only have like think about buying it, or do you already have one of these things. Thanks for watching, consider subscribing, hit the little bell. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, and it will be great to see you in the next video.